Will my custodian offer every mutual fund that I might want to use with my clients? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA video series. It is question number 19. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where I help advisors just like you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition to the RIA model. On today's question, we're going to talk about, okay, if I were to make that transition, would I be able to use every mutual fund that I want to use with my clients? Basically, does my custodian offer every mutual fund that I might want to use with my clients? And so a couple things I want to go through on today's video to discuss that. So the first thing is just a recap of that RIA custodian relationship. So it talks about this in a couple different ways on prior videos. But the idea is if you were to go start your own RIA, transition to that model, you will have your RIA. However, you will need a custodian to actually custody, and as they say, custody and clear, the clear in this, the doing the trades, of your client's assets. So you're the RIA, you rely on a custodian to hold those clients' assets and to facilitate those trades. And so you do have that relationship. So now what that means is if you use one custodian, and I'll do some videos on this, you can actually use multiple custodians as well. But regardless, whether it's one or two or three, you can only basically offer what that custodian has available on their platform. And so today's question is, okay, what can I expect if I were to transition into this and I use mutual funds now or I plan on using them in the future? What can I expect my custodian to make available to me to be able to offer with my clients? And will I have any problems with mutual funds in that regard? And so the short answer is every major custodian offers thousands of mutual funds, makes it available for you to use. So right out of the gate, the good news is, call it ballpark 95% of the time, whatever you're currently using is probably not going to be an issue. So if you have it available to you, whatever your current firm is, if you were to transition, choose a custodian, I'd venture to say out of the gate, call it 95% of the time, they're already going to have that available, and it's not going to be an issue. And sometimes it's even at 100% of the time. And I'm going to give you some examples of where you might have to start being concerned about maybe falling outside of that kind of for sure situation. But the thing to keep in mind is you might think, well, come on, a large custodian, why don't they just have every mutual fund out there and just make it simple for the RIAs that use them for custodial services? And a couple things to that. The first is, keep in mind, there's kind of three prongs of what has to be available. First, they have to be working with the actual fund family, for starters, that you want to utilize. Then within that, they also have to make available the specific mutual fund within that fund family that you want to use. And then within that, they have to make sure that the various share classes that fund has, that the share class you want to use or have been using is available. And there used to be a time, right, that share classes, 15 plus years ago was literally A, B, and C, and it was relatively simple. Now some mutual funds have a dozen or more different share classes. So it's not as black and white that, the custodian would have every share class possible. And so hence whatever I'm using now, they will surely have. So again, three kind of steps that all have to line up just for starters. That custodian has to have a relationship with the fund family, the specific fund you want to use, and then the specific share class of that fund that you want to use. And so that's where it begins. Again, it starts to get a little more tricky here than just a simple answer of, yes, this won't be an issue for you. And then you might say to yourself, okay, I get all that, but come on, why doesn't the custodian just take the time and take the effort and get relationships so you can use all of the fund families and all of the mutual funds and all of the share classes? And the reality is, because there's some challenges to that. So I want to go through this real quick. So the first one is, for a custodian to offer a particular mutual fund on their platform, they have to have a sell-in agreement, as they call it, with that mutual fund company. So for starters, there is a whole contractual arrangement that has to be entered into, a sell-in agreement between the custodian and the RA. And this is the same thing at your current firm. If you're at a more traditional captive type brokerage firm or wirehouse type firm, they have selling agreements as well with all of the mutual funds that they make available on their platform for you to use currently. So that's a process. That's not just some simple one-page boilerplate template that everyone uses and they sign off. Usually that's a whole process that involves a legal review, sometimes back and forth between the custodian and the mutual fund company that, we don't like the verbiage in paragraph 8 on page 12 and we want to change it. Then it gets sent over back to the mutual fund company. Then the mutual fund company has to have their lawyers look at it. So entering into a seller agreement is a pretty big undertaking. And so for that reason, custodians won't just do it with necessarily any opportunity that comes along, because there are a lot of resources that have to go into making sure this seller agreement properly gets put in place. And again, generally part of that is a legal review, which again adds time and cost to that whole process for all parties involved, both the mutual fund company and the custodian. And then on an ongoing basis, the more of these selling agreements that a custodian has in place, there's the kind of responsibility on an ongoing basis to make sure that all the terms of the selling agreement are being met by both parties. And so, while there's already thousands of these in place, every time you add one more, it is that much more responsibility, that much more complexity to make sure these agreements are being followed again on an ongoing basis. And then the last thing on that is, keep in mind, one of the ways a custodian generates revenue is from these selling agreements. So, and I'll have to do a whole different video because there's a whole lot of nuances to it, but how a custodian generates revenue, one of those ways is with that relationship with the mutual fund company, what's generally referred to as revenue share. And that might be things like omnibus fees for certain record keeping the custodian does on behalf of the mutual fund, or education and marketing fees, as they call it, for kind of making the fund available on the platform, and maybe some promotion of that out to advisors to make sure they're aware that it's available. And so that adds a whole additional dynamic to it, because not only is, okay, we need a selling agreement, not only do we have to make sure the legal part of it goes through, is, okay, what is going to be the economic arrangement? Sometimes there's not, and that creates a host of challenges. And then within that, okay, we're going to have some sort of arrangement. Well, how much is that going to be for? And there can be a lot of back and forth on that as well. So that adds complexity to the whole issue of, why don't we just add every mutual fund onto the platform? So some challenges on there, and it's just worth keeping in mind, when we say, well, again, why isn't there just 100% of mutual funds available? Because there are challenges to getting mutual funds available on a platform. Now, but with that, like I said, custodians realize they need to have a very deep bench of mutual funds available for the RAs that are going to utilize them to be able to use with their clients. So they have done this legwork with thousands of mutual funds to be able to get them available for you to use. And so in most cases, they are, whatever ones you're currently using are most likely, again, assuming you go with one of the bigger custodians, are going to be available. But a couple examples of where you might pause a little on, okay, is this almost by default going to be available to me of scenarios? So a couple examples: if you either currently or desire to use a mutual fund from, as an example, a small upstart mutual fund company, either the mutual fund family as a whole, or for instance, if they launch a new particular fund and it's new, so there's not really any track record to it, hasn't been in existence a while, and then the assets perhaps are very small as well. A custodian is not necessarily going to run out the day a mutual fund company launches a new mutual fund to try to, hey, let's make sure we get this on our platform, because again, there's a lot of this work that goes into this, and unfortunately, sometimes some funds, fail to launch, if you will, that they never, while they technically go out there in the marketplace, they don't catch on, and they never get growth and never are able to scale, and then the fund family ends up kind of merging it into some other fund. And so a custodian doesn't necessarily want to jump that gun and do all that work for a mutual fund that might not even stay around all that long, to be honest. So if you want to use a new fund or a small fund, just know it's potentially possible to work with your custodian to get a selling agreement if one does not already exist. But that is a bit more of an uphill climb than just a traditional large fund that's been around forever. Then the next caveat is, again, there's the three prongs. We talk about the fund family, the actual fund, and then the share class. And that last one is where it gets complicated nowadays, because there are so many share classes. And so a custodian could have the large universe of fund families, and within that could have the large universe of funds. But it is hard, perhaps, to maybe have as many of the share classes, and some of those share classes are not even meant to, they're specific only for 401k plans. So it's, a custodian couldn't necessarily have every share class even if they wanted to. It's just not applicable. But as these share classes expand and expand and expand and become, higher in number, that's where it gets a little trickier. That, okay, currently you are using this fund family and this fund and this share class. That particular share class may or may not be within the custodian sell-in agreement. So that adds a little challenge as well, or just the increase in the number of share classes that are out there. And then the last kind of challenging thing, and thankfully we're seeing less and less of this, but is if you're at a firm now and they offer some sort of proprietary in-house mutual fund, and perhaps they attempt to position it as, oh, this is for your benefit, that we only make it available to our advisors that are with us on our platform. And you see less and less of this nowadays, but it still exists to some degree. And so the challenge is, while maybe there are some benefits to you currently, that you have access to this particular mutual fund that's only available to client or advisors, and hence clients of this brokerage firm. The challenge with that is, more than likely, almost guaranteed, if that's how they're positioning it, that no other firm or no other custodian will have a sell-in agreement for that fund. So if you have clients in that proprietary fund that's not meant to go anywhere else, you probably will have a problem that your custodian will not have a sell-in agreement for that fund. And then that of course creates its own challenges of how do you maybe move clients out of that fund into something else instead. So the point of that is just to know that the large bulk of whatever you might be currently using is probably available already on a custodial platform. But there are potentially some instances where it could be a challenge. So the typical process in this is, and this is something I coach advisors on and walk them through these steps, is if you decide, yes, the RIA model is what I want to pursue here, and then you're working with custodians, which again, I help advisors understand how they're different and why one might be better for their particular situation than another. But a typical step in that process, no matter what path you go on, is ahead of time, right, is to go to that custodian and say, here is the exact mutual funds and share classes I use currently. Do you have them available? And that's a pretty routine thing for any custodian. They'll do a scrub and come back and say, yes, we have them, or no, we don't. And in some instances, they might even come back and say, oh, we don't have the particular share class you asked about, but it turns out we actually have a share class that's even less expensive to the client. And so, you and the client aren't going to have any problem just changing into that share class. And so that actually can be a positive, that maybe the share classes don't match up perfectly, but that is something you will just want to do, just to know. So you go in with eyes wide open, exactly, okay, what do I have now? Is there going to be any challenges with me just continuing on that path on a going forward basis? So with that, like I said, not a giant thing to be worried about, because the mutual fund universe is generally covered, but it is important to be aware of these caveats. It is important to take that step and have your custodian do that scrub, ahead of time, to make sure that you're not going to have any issues there at the 11th hour as you're making that transition. So with that, like I said, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, and this is the type of thing I help advisors with. I want to help advisors understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition to the RIA model. So today's conversation about, hey, how do mutual funds work with the custodian? That's a perfect example that I have this dialogue with advisors and really want to educate you on everything you need to know, so you can decide, hey, is this the best path for me? And then if so, how do I actually go about making that transition? And I'd be happy to help you with that as well. If you're not already there, jump on over to transitiontoria.com. I have plenty more videos. I have some white papers, And then the easiest thing to do is right at the top is a contact link. Just click on that. You can instantly and easily schedule a specific date and time that we can have a dialogue just like this, and I can begin to walk you through anything and everything you want to know about the RIA model, and specifically how your unique practice would look under the RIA umbrella and what that might mean for you, and really help you to begin to kind of explore that as an option. I'd be more than happy to do that with you. So with that, I hope you found value in today's video, and I'll see you on the next one.